The sun set low over the village, casting long shadows across the wooden gallows that stood solemnly in the center of town. The air hung thick with tension, like a bully's hand poised to strike. The executioner's axe glimmered, its edge hungry for the weight of flesh. The apprentice, a ghost of a boy named Elias, stared at the cold steel, his breath short and shallow. "There's blood in duty," he thought, the words hanging bitter in the back of his throat. He was trained to feel nothing, yet the ache of something unsaid gnawed at him like a rat in the walls. Elias crouched in the shadows, cloaked in the dim light of the executioner's hut. The floor creaked like lost souls. The wooden beams felt heavy, burdened with secrets. "You ready?" The voice cracked like dry wood. It was Aldrich, the town executioner, swordsman turned harbinger of death. He had the look of a man who had swallowed too many secrets. "I am," Elias replied, but the words felt hollow. Aldrich nodded, the lines on his face deep as the rivers carved through the land. "Remember, it's not about you. Follow the code. The kingdom demands it." "The kingdom?" Elias echoed, more to himself. The sun's last rays cut through the open window, illuminating dust motes dancing like lost spirits. But he could not shake the tightness in his chest. The axe whispered promises of finality. "What if the code is wrong?" he said. "It's all we have," Aldrich growled, gripping the axe tighter. "Obey, and you will find peace." But peace was a man buried deep in the ground, and he shivered at the thought of what lay ahead. The rope frayed like the morality of the land. The square bristled with tension. A sea of faces gathered in anticipation, each one a silent jury poised to judge. Mothers pulled their children close. Men exchanged wary glances. Elias felt their weight, all of them watching. The condemned stood at the gallows, a figure shrouded in rags and shadows. "Do your job," someone from the crowd shouted, voice edged with contempt. The others echoed, a chant rising like the dust around. Elias gripped the axe, hands trembling. A figure shifted in the throng, a woman with familiar eyes locked onto his, a spark of recognition igniting dread in his heart. "Ella?" he whispered, almost lost in the chaos, but fear gripped his throat. The silence hung unbearable, the rope swaying gently in the wind as though eager to claim its prize. Aldrich's hand pressed heavily on his shoulder. "Do it for your land. It is your duty." But the land felt alien now, and the cries of those gathered ripped through him like a thunderclap. He held the axe aloft, with the weight of generations on his young shoulders. After the crowd dispersed, Elias and Aldrich returned to the shack. It smelled of sweat and iron, remnants of lives sealed. The walls remembered. "I know her." The words slipped from Elias like autumn leaves. Aldrich paused, a frown darkening his features. "You speak of the condemned? The law is clear, boy. She's my sister," he admitted, the admission bitter on his tongue. "I know," Aldrich replied quietly. The ghost of sympathy flickered behind his eyes, then dimmed. "But loyalty demands." "Loyalty demands what?" Elias shouted, fists clenched. "A life for a life. What justice rests in that?" His mentor turned, towering like a dark cloud. "Justice is the armor we wear. Put it on, apprentice. You have no choice now but to fulfill your duty." Outside, the night howled, echoing the mad conflict raging within. The land, once a cradle of warmth, now felt like a bladed edge ready to slice through flesh and spirit alike. The night was heavy as a funeral shroud, silence oppressive. Elias found himself beneath the stars, their distant glow mocking him. The wind cut through flesh. He could hear the murmur of the past, soft as a mother's lullaby, urging him to remember. He replayed memories in his mind, sun-soaked days with Ella, laughter echoing against the cliffs like a sweet serenade. "We would never be parted," she had said, the promise lingering in the air like the scent of blooming wildflowers. But the world shifted beneath him, shifting the pillars of his existence with cruel alacrity. He tapped his fingers against his thigh, his pulse quickening. "This isn't justice," he whispered into the dark, hoping the void would answer. But it only laughed. The cold blades of fate were not forgiving. In the morning light, the gallows loomed larger than life. The familiar crowd gathered, voices a low murmur of anticipation, the stench of the coming execution thick in the air. Elias's heart thundered in his chest. In the distance, a raven circled, ominous and still. "What do you nail to the gallows?" he asked himself, the question ripping at his insides. Aldrich stood ready, calm, composed, a machine of death. The sound of the crowd was a beast gnawing at his sanity. "This is what you've trained for," Aldrich said. "Do not waver, boy." "But what if the one condemned is innocent?" Elias countered, voice strong yet trembling. "What if it's your own? How do I stand tall in the shadow of that?" "There's no room for mercy in this trade," Aldrich said, his gaze hardening. The sword hung heavy between them, and Elias could feel the sand shift beneath his feet as the world threatened to swallow him whole. The crowd roared as he lifted the axe. Sweat dripped down his brow, mingling with tears that threatened to spill. "I choose humanity," he shouted, voice breaking. "I choose her." Gasps rippled through the throng. Aldrich's face twisted in anger. "You're a fool," he growled. "It's the code that is foolish," Elias retorted, stepping back, the axe lowered. "Have we traded lives for regulation?" A pulse echoed through the crowd. He felt them swaying, hesitant to choose sides. "Let her go," he implored, voice rising like the dawn. Suddenly the noose felt heavier than stone. "Elias!" Ella cried, her hope a beacon piercing the dark. In that moment, clarity bloomed like the first flower of spring amid the winter frost. The executioner's blade did not dictate his right to live. With a swift movement, he threw down the axe, its clatter cutting through the silence. "I choose my sister." Aldrich inhaled deeply, eyes narrowed. "You've made your choice." But in that choice, Elias had sown the seeds of rebellion. He felt the crowd shift, caught in the current of change. "Justice is not a chain," he said, stepping towards Ella, now free from the noose's grasp. They embraced, lifeblood intertwining, and as they stood together, the winds whispered, "A new beginning." The sun emerged, bright and relentless, casting shadows behind them as they walked away from the gallows, uncertain but resolute in their defiance. If this story stirred something deep within your heart, join us for more tales that echo through time by subscribing to Medieval Stories. Your journey is just beginning. As they walked away from the gallows, the oppressive weight of the crowd seemed to dissipate. Elias could feel his heart racing, and the pulse of the world around him felt alive again. The once stagnant air now vibrated with the tension of choices made and lives reclaimed. Every step felt charged, as though they were walking on new ground, each grain of dirt a reminder of what they had escaped. "Elias!" A voice rang out behind them, cutting through the haze of freedom. It was Aldrich, the specter of authority, a grim shadow trailing their moment of rebellion. He approached with a fury that crackled in the air, eyes darkened by rage and disappointment. "Do you really think you can defy the law?" he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You've turned your back on everything we built. You're no longer an apprentice. You're a traitor." Elias turned, heart pounding against his ribs. "No, Aldrich. I've chosen mercy over the cold steel of your blade. I've chosen life." "Life?" Aldrich responded with a scoff, the wind carrying the sound away like a dying whisper. "You choose chaos. You think the world can merely forgive your insolence? It demands blood, and you've just spilled yours. You will pay for this." The words hung in the air, heavy as a funeral shroud. Aldrich stepped closer, the weight of his authority crashing like thunder. "And if it isn't you, then it will be her. A sister will not save your life when the gallows beckon once more." The reality of those words weighed down on Elias, shadowed by the dark truth. Had he just signed Ella's death warrant with his own rebellion? A flicker of fear coursed through him, and in that moment, he felt the depth of the canyon between them. Ella placed a hand on his arm, grounding him. "Perhaps we can find a new path," she said softly, the courage in her voice igniting something within him. "Together." "But the law," Elias murmured, the remnants of fear clawing at his insides. "But the law is broken," she insisted, her voice a fierce flame. "We can build something better. We can reforge bonds in the fires of justice." Elias felt the flicker of hope sparking anew, a warmth spreading through the chill of despair. But Aldrich's glare remained, a storm cloud refusing to dissipate. "You think you can just run?" Aldrich mocked, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "You know what happens to traitors in these parts. The law doesn't let those who defy it live to tell the tale." "Then let them come," Elias shouted, the fire igniting in his chest once more. "Let them come for me. I will no longer turn my back on what's right. If I am a traitor, then I will be a traitor for justice." The crowd stood in silence, watching the showdown unfold, a silent testament to conflict within the hearts of men. Some exchanged glances, uncertainty painted across their faces. The spark of dissent was alive, and Elias could feel it reshaping the air around him, forming an unyielding resolve. Aldrich, unyielding and fierce, took a step forward, stony resolve in his eyes. "You think you're ready to face what follows? You're but a child, unformed, naive. The world is darker than you can imagine. You are stepping into shadows deeper than any gallows could offer. But it is those shadows we must traverse," Ella cried, the fire in her own heart igniting something fierce in Elias. "Let the winds of change rise." A flicker of understanding ignited in Elias as he took her hand, feeling the warmth of her conviction envelop him. For the first time, he saw the world not only as a cruel judge, but also as a canvas ripe for change, colors waiting to be filled in with strokes of courage. "Let's confront whatever comes," he said, meeting Aldrich's fierce glare with conviction. "Together." Aldrich's face twisted with anger as he saw the bond forming between them. "You have no idea what you are inviting. The kingdom will not flinch. The axe is still heavy, and I will ensure that you learn this lesson in blood." The crowd began to murmur, uncertainty rising like heat waves in the desert. Whispers swept through them, eyes darting back and forth. Perhaps they were starting to see the potential for rebellion, for movement, where before there were only the solid walls of fear. Elias sensed the tide shifting. "People of the kingdom, you stand on stagnant ground, where the old ways choke the very life from your souls. I feel the weight of the past upon us, and I refuse to let it shape the future. You draw your knife, but not against flesh," Aldrich countered, his voice grinding like stone. Traits like yours lead to ruin. But what if ruin is our salvation? Elias thrust his chin forward, spurred by the fires of urgency. What if it is the death of the old that paves the path to something better? We cannot be mere players anymore, shackled to the stage of tradition. The crowd's murmur grew bolder, their eyes flaring with anticipation. A glimmer of uncertainty flickered in Aldrich's eyes, the grip on reality loosening just enough. And how do you propose to change the minds that have lived and died by this law? Elias took a deep breath, rising to the challenge. We'll show them, one act of defiance at a time, one choice for mercy over violence. We'll find allies among the people. This is not just about one death, it's about the lives of many. Ella squeezed his hand, emboldened. Follow us to a new dawn. We shall rise together. The gallows do not bind the spirit. The fire ignited anew within the hearts there. The crowd began to roar. Rise, rise, rise! The chant grew, swelling into a mighty wave, pushing back against the shadows. Aldrich's eyes narrowed, but the glint of uncertainty was unmistakable. It was clear now. The crowd had awakened to the call of rebellion, and he stood alone against a tide of change. He stepped back, anger rolling off him like thunder. You misunderstand your place, all of you, he growled, attempting to regain control. This is a game for kings and those willing to pay the price. Elias turned back to the people, their faces illuminated by the flame of rebellion. We will not pay with blood. We will stand together against tyranny. And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with the colors of defiance, a movement began to take form among the crowd. A movement born not of fury, but of understanding, compassion, and hope. It was as if the landscape itself conspired with their voices, with the very earth stirring beneath the raw energy of unity. If this story resonated within your heart, stirring the embers of rebellion and igniting the flames of justice, join us as we explore further tales of courage in the face of darkness by subscribing to Medieval Stories. Your journey is just beginning. As the crowd surged with their newfound fervor, Aldrich took a step back, the once potent fear he wielded as his weapon slipping from his grasp like sand through an open palm. Elias felt the energy humming in the air, alive and electric, a force pushing against the darkness that sought to ensnare them. Do not be fooled by the cries for change, Aldrich bellowed, his voice raw with fear and anger. This is the voice of chaos. You will find nothing but ruin in your pursuit of justice. But the crowd was no longer listening to him. They had tasted freedom, however fleeting. They began to chant Elias's name, spurred by the momentum of his defiance. As he stood among them, he could feel their collective heart beating, a rhythm of hope that resonated deep within him. What will you do now, Aldrich? Will you silence us with your blade? Or will you seek the strength to change? Elias's voice rang clear, piercing through the cacophony, challenging the very foundation of their fear. We will not yield, Ella shouted, stepping beside Elias. We will step into the light of a new day. We will break the chains that bind us. Aldrich's eyes flared with contempt. You think your cries will grant you power? Your rebellion is but a flicker against the storm, and I am its eye. The kingdom won't rest until the blood is spilled, either yours or that of the ungrateful souls who turn against their own. For too long your sword has ruled us, came a voice from the back of the crowd, strong and resolute. For too long we have been pawns to a master's game. A surge of agreement rippled through the throng. They began to chant again, "No more, no more." But Aldrich's anger boiled over, raw and palpable. "You are nothing without me, a ship adrift on the waters of fate." "I will not be ruled by fear," Elias shouted, the words echoing across the square, bringing silence in their wake. "If we are to sail these churning seas, we will do so united, together." The crowd surged again, a wave of hope crashing against the hard rocks of tyranny. "Together! Together!" Their voices painted the sky with longing and defiance, filling the air with the heat of their collective spirit. Aldrich realized his grip on power was loosening. "You think I will sit idly by while you play at rebellion? You deceive yourselves. Your unity will wither like grass in the winter, and I will ensure you are met with the wrath of the crown." Something shifted in the crowd. Elias sensed the unease. They were beginning to question the strength of their resolve. Would they truly stand against Aldrich and the oppression he embodied? Life was not a game, and the stakes were painfully high. "You can call upon the might of the crown," Elias shouted into the fray. "But remember this, the strength of our voices is more potent than any sword. The spirit can never be shackled by fear. If we falter, we must rise again." His words ignited flames of conviction deep within, and he could see their courage beginning to solidify. "We are more than the sum of our fears. We are compassion incarnate. We can tear down the walls of hatred and rebuild a world where mercy reigns. There is strength in our blood ties. Let them be the ties that bind us to a future, not the chains of our past." As the crowd listened, with every heartbeat they drew closer, unified by a common purpose. Aldrich's fury rattled like thunder. He searched their faces, looking for flickers of doubt, but found only fierce resolve staring back at him. "You think I will let you turn our traditions to dust? Your screams will not echo in vain," he growled. And then he turned, storming away, the air thick with malice as he muttered dark threats to himself, leaving Elias with the crowd. "Let them come," Elias said, heart hammering, resolve burning hotter than the midday sun. "Let them come and listen to the truth. We'll speak not in violence, but in unity. Every voice matters, and together we craft a song to drown out the darkness." The murmurs began to rise once more. New voices, old faces, people from all walks of life were drawn into the fervor, ignited by the passion that Elias and Ella had sparked. Hope moved like a tangible thing through the crowd, swirling like the wind that danced through dry grasses. In that moment, everything shifted. "We will rise," a young woman proclaimed, stepping forward, the fire in her eyes reflecting the passion of the onlookers. "We will rise to meet the changing winds." Elated, the collective lifted that sentiment higher, echoing the declaration until every heart felt the weight and warmth of solidarity. "Together we rise! Together we rise!" Elias's heart brimmed with passion stronger than he had ever known. As he surrendered to the power of their unity, the reality of their shared humanity became clearer. Here was something larger than himself, a movement perhaps unshackled from seasons of despair, a beacon shining against what lay ahead. The winds of change whispered through the square, urging each of them onward, past fear, past the looming specter of Aldrich. There might be pain, but there would also be hope. They would face it all together. "It's just the beginning," Ella said, her voice steady beside him. "We've spoken the first words of revolution." "Yes," he replied, steeling his heart. "And we will not be silenced. The world is watching, and we must show them the power we hold." If your spirit ignites with the fire of rebellion and the call to justice stirs your heart, join us in chronicling more stories that define the ages by subscribing to Medieval Stories. Together, we can create a future fueled by the echoes of courage. The town square became a crucible of fervor where the heat of conviction rose thick in the air like smoke from an unyielding fire. Faces lit by the fading sun bore the marks of resilience, every line and shadow telling tales of battles fought and lost, hopes buried in the dust of generations. But today, those hopes were rising again, like the phoenix of legend, each heartbeat reverberating with the promise of change. Elias stood at the center, heart racing, as he felt the crowd tighten around him, their collective warmth igniting something deep within. "We stand at a crossroads," he called out, his words weaving through the air. "This is the moment where our past meets the possibility of a new dawn. We can forge a world born of unity and compassion, but first we must make our voices heard, not just here, but in every home, every heart." Ella's hand gripped his tightly, her spirit unwavering beside him. "We must share our truth," she added, her voice gaining strength. "We will venture beyond these walls, speaking to those who have kept their heads down, those who have felt powerless against the tide of despair. And we will gather allies," Elias continued, feeling inspired by her fervor. "There are others who yearn for change, but fear the shadows that cling to them. Together, we can light a path through the darkness." The crowd nodded, a wave of understanding flowing through the throng. They felt the gravity of the moment pressing upon them, urging them to take the first step into the unknown. "Tonight, we will plant the seeds of rebellion in the hearts of the restless," he declared, raising his fist high, the sun dipping further below the horizon, as if bowing in reverence to their determination. "Tomorrow, we spread our message like wildfire." The energy surged, manifesting as a chorus of agreement. "Yes, yes. Let's disperse and meet back here at dawn," came a shout from the depths of the crowd. "We'll gather what we need, and we'll march not just for ourselves, but for all who've suffered beneath the weight of authority." With that rallying cry, the crowd began to scatter, hearts pounding with newfound purpose. Elias could see the determination etched on their faces, vibrancy crackling in the air around them. They were more than individuals now. They were a collective force, buoyed by the winds of change. "Where do we go first?" Ella asked as they stepped away from the thick of the crowd, the two of them together amidst the swelling tide of shifting alliances and newfound hopes. Elias paused, collecting his thoughts as the shadows stretched long behind them. "We go to the taverns, the heart of the people's voices. The stories exchanged over a warm drink can inspire more than fear. They can spark courage." Ella smiled, fire igniting in her chest. "Yes, those places harbor wisdom and shared experiences. We'll talk to those whom Aldrich has silenced, who have been too afraid to speak." The first tavern they approached was a modest structure, its wooden frame worn yet welcoming. As they entered, the aroma of roast meat and the robust scent of ale enveloped them. A fire crackled in the hearth, illuminating the faces of weary patrons nursing their drinks, faces that had witnessed the passing of ruin in their lives. As Elias and Ella stepped forward, a hush fell over the room, uncertainty clouding the air. Whispers of recognition passed between a few. It was Aldrich's apprentice who dared to make the first move, standing amidst the din of the tavern, as if called there by fate itself. Elias cleared his throat, taking in the grim expressions of the men and women gathered around their tables. We've come to share a message of hope, not just for ourselves, but for all of you. What hope can you offer us? A burly man called from the back. His eyes narrowed distrustfully. We've known nothing but tyranny. You're just a boy with a dream. Elias's heart raced, but he pushed through the anxiety. Once, I believed that darkness would swallow us whole, but change is upon us, and we have the power to rise. We can challenge the chains that bind us not with blades, but with our resolve. Ella stepped closer, her voice steady. Aldrich does not represent us. He does not care for your pain. He only wishes to maintain his grasp on power. Together, we can stand against him. Together, we can reclaim our voices. The tension in the tavern crackled, uncertainty pierced by the embers of curiosity and longing. Slowly, people began to lean in, their eyes reflecting flickers of hope. What do you mean, reclaim our voices? Another voice called, a woman with weathered skin who looked weary but interested. Elias examined the crowd, gathering his courage. By sharing our stories, by finding common ground, we can illuminate the truth for each other. We can remind ourselves that our struggles are shared, and that unity is the bedrock of change. Then, the tavern's owner, a stout woman with an apron dusted in flour, chimed in. I've seen my customers come in broken by the harshness of life. If we gather our stories, share our pain, we can build something stronger. We've long been silenced. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and Elias felt the spirit of the revolution reignite within the room. Tonight we'll share, he said, eyes glinting. We will light the way for those too afraid or too broken to rise for themselves. Together, we build a tapestry of courage, one voice at a time. Let's hear it, the burly man shouted, and the laughter that followed bore the sound of freedom, a promise that perhaps the chains of silence could indeed be broken, and so they began. One by one, as the night stretched on, stories poured forth, tales of loss, longing, betrayal, but also of resilience. Each voice served as a spark, igniting the hearts of others, pushing back against the tide of despair that had once brought them to their knees. As they shared their truths with each other, Elias saw the crowd transform. Their eyes brightened, shoulders squared, and hope began to blossom, reviving the humans who had once resigned themselves to shadows. By the time the first light of dawn began to creep through the tavern windows, a fire burned within each person gathered. They were more than individuals. They now stood as a united front, ready to face the world. The time for action awaited on the horizon, a promise of a day ripe for change. If these tales of resilience moved you, if you feel the call to share in the voices of history and breathe life into the stories that shape our world, join us and subscribe to Medieval Stories. Together, we can unleash the power of our narratives and reclaim the past for the promise of tomorrow.